Can we use Koin with your SDK? Yes, we can. We can, and it's working perfectly. There are like maybe some constraints, but I will show you the list of them. There is a lot of pros as you've seen, like easy testing, better code readability. You can use DSL. You can actually use annotations, but with non-KMP projects or otherwise, you'll have to bring all this setup that you saw there. And then there is like, if you use annotations, they do support internal. So if you annotate a class as internal, the one that is also generated for you is internal, so no problem at all. The ability to analyze and track performance out of the box is something that it's more like, let's say, Koin based. You can monitor it cloud based. And then the cons. I mean, like I said, KSP is a bit hard for KMP projects. Having dependencies passed from the app, which might be using another DI, and then using it inside of your SDK, you need to be careful with that, all right? So you need to know what are you actually declaring as singletons and then providing it. And there might be, I mean, we only had one issue. It was very small, is if your app is also using Koin and they are using too much far apart of versioning, it might be like a clash, right? Because at a certain point, they will need to update your library, and your library is already having the latest version of Koin, so they sort of match there. Hello, everyone. Can you guys hear me? Hope so. Nice. Yeah, so I'm going to talk about simplifying SDK with Koin. Yeah. I'm Pedro Santos, and I work for Mercedes-Benz IO as a mobile tech lead. Currently in one of the teams, which is Fuel and Pay SDK. I code apps since 2009, which is really a long time to be an Android developer. Really passed through a lot. And I am a Koin community lead. So yeah, if you have questions, just grab me outside. Feel free. So I come from app development, and I never had a lot of contact with like building an SDK. SDK development and app development are quite different, and I wasn't expecting that when I joined Mercedes-Benz. And yeah, it changes quite a lot, and you need to kind of like unlearn to then bring whatever you learned back then. So let's go through. Like, we have app development, and in app development, a lot of stuff is already built in for you nowadays, right? You have architecture components, they are already there for you. You're not tied to a single dependency. You can just switch from one to another. You're using Dagger, now you're using Koin. You know, it's how can I say, you have flexibility, right? Yeah, about testing, there is a lot of libraries like MoKK that allow you to test those easier. Releases and streamlines are like much, let's say, stabilized for app development. For SDKs, let's just say it's not really the same. When you're developing an SDK, especially if you go to open source and try to just release it, try to see the pain, how much it is to have those things with Maven and so on and so forth. Even though sometimes we don't want to talk about it, it's there. Then you have documentation, which, by the way, some people, they don't read it. But you always try to have your documentation up to date, because if you have a major release, you know, things break up and people need to go back and see what broke up and so on and so forth. But at the same time, you need to keep backward compatibility, because there is apps out there that they are using your library and they need to still be using it, right? And so the effort for updating sometimes is too hard. So I would like to ask a question of you guys. Like, I mean, I hope you guys know what dependency injection is, right? In normal, say, let's say you have like object and you try to have some attributes there and you want the dependency injection framework, wherever it is, Dagger, Koin, Kotlin, to resolve the dependencies for you, to work for you, basically, right? So I want to see those raise hands to see who of you actually use dependency injection. Whatever type of dependency injection you guys use. Okay. And from those of you, which ones of you using Koin? Oh, wow. That's really nice to see. All right. All right. So let's jump back to SDK structures, right? So usually, like a very common pattern is a builder pattern, as you guys see here from OKHTTP, right? It has a builder there. Usually, it's in a companion object. So then the client can be testable, let's say, right? So you still make it a singleton and is used on your app, and you know, it's up to you if you want to make it a singleton or not by using Koin internally on your app. Okay, that's nice. Some SDKs, though, they use something like this, which is like an object. And then that object SDK is not that much testable, right? And yeah, that's tricky there, right? I mean, you can use mock-KK to actually test those. It's true, but it slows down your testing. So let's look. Sorry. So cons, it's, as I said, hard to test. As you guys see, it's like lots of boilerplate code because, for instance, if you want to have a singleton inside of your SDK, but you don't want to use dependency injection, you end up building all this instance class, you know, like a companion object inside, and then it keeps the instance, and you know, I think you guys know what I'm talking about. And let's face it, if you join a junior developer into your team, and he's used to use apps, you know, and then he comes to your SDK and he doesn't see this, like dependency injection, he starts asking questions. He started asking questions like, hey, but I mean, why is this like that? Like, why is this instance here? I mean, it looks like a fragment, and you're getting the instance of the fragment and so on. And so let's see how can we improve. So the question is, in Koin, if you're using an app, this is how it usually looks like, right? Rather you do this in your main activity or in your application class, and then of course you have a module, but here you're using a global context. What this means is that wherever modules you put inside of this global context, they will be accessed all over the app, all right? Guess we all understood this part, right? But the question is, so can I use dependency injection on a library? The answer is yes, you can, sure. But is not that straightforward. So there is a few things that we will need to take into consideration when you do it. All right, and yeah, sure. Let's dive into it. So first thing first is how can I use it, right? So in Koin, there is a so-called context isolation. You can actually use Koin within your SDK, and I mean, I'm not going to read it, but this is actually quoted from Koin website, is context isolation allows you to work with dependency injection in a non-global way, right? So basically for the app, when you're using your SDK, they don't know that you're using dependency injection inside, which is quite nice, right? The only thing they would be able to see is maybe if they're using Dagger and you're using Koin, okay, Koin dependency is still there, right? Because you're your SDK needs it. So let's dive into how can I use it, right? So first of all, you need to declare the dependencies like you ever do in your app, but you would do it in your SDK. You need to import Koin core. Then you need to create your isolated context, right? And then the third step is just a Koin component that you need to have, so therefore it allows you to have dependency injection across your apps. First of all, like declaring dependencies. I mean, here we are looking at a version catalog. And yeah, for using a normal DSL only, like you can just import it, the Koin core, very simple, nothing outstanding, and you just use implementation inside of your main Gradle. Good. Then you will need to declare a isolated Koin context. Okay, and here I'm gonna go a bit slower. All right, try to follow this one. The thing is, we need to grab a Koin application and we need to isolate it here. It's private, right? And we were gonna load the modules that are inside of your SDK. You put your modules there, fine. And then you will need to have access to this Koin instance, which is kind of like your Koin singleton inside of this isolated context. Then you will need to declare your Koin component, and you'll go back to your Koin context and just give it to it. Koin component, basically what it does is that you can have classes which are non-platform specific, and if you extend from it, right, you can inject directly, right? You don't need to use the constructor class if you need to, which is quite handy, especially when you are, like, let's say, doing refactorings, and there is a lot of other code that is there, but is not really in the constructor part. So it's done, ready to use, right? Now the thing is, you do need to please, and don't forget, this is really like a warning, your Koin context needs to be internal. You should not allow that the app has access to it. The thing is, if it does, you can actually load dependencies from outside, and if they are internal and they are declared as internal, you get a runtime error, right? Because it shouldn't happen, right? Now, usages. The way you declare a module, it becomes just like a variable. You put your dependencies there. I think from those of you that actually used it, it's quite straightforward. That's what Koin tries to be, is like a more pragmatic way, easy way for people to understand dependency injection. And of course, what you do have is, let's say for singletons, you declare them as single. You can actually use binding. In this case, for instance, the electricity provider is a binding that you're actually using. But you can also use multiple bindings under the same singleton. So feel free to use it. And yeah, in here you are actually providing another coffee machine. I'm a coffee lover, by the way. So a factory is very easy. You just put it there, put what you would expect to be a factory for you, which for me is the coffee beans, as you might imagine. They are a factory. I want as many as possible. And I mean, that's it, right? We can already inject it, right? The injection is very simple. You have your SDK in this case, and you just need to use your isolated context, and you use injection inside of the SDK. not a big deal. And it makes some developers much comfortable while coding because they come from an app, they go to an SDK, then they see this and they say, oh, wow, it's not that much difference, right? And so, okay, it's done. Let's go home, right? I mean, there is nothing else in this presentation. Let's see if we can. We are very, very in terms of excellence, right? So we want more. We want to do this even better. So the thing is, when you look to this singleton, right, you see that it has some gets there. So it's trying to get the coffee machine with electricity provider and the coffee beans. But this get, when I go back to the definition of dependency injection, is sort of like you want Koin, or the dependency injection framework, to actually resolve those things for you, right? So when you look at these gets, they don't really reassemble what I was saying, right? I mean, I want this to resolve. Why should I put those gets? So Koin has what I call, and some people don't like it, is the DSL 2.0, which allows you to do something like this, which is you only do a single off your coffee machine and you do a single off your electricity provider, and as soon as those dependencies are resolved, it can generate it for you. So you don't have any problems. You just need to be sure that wherever it is in those constructors, they are going to be provided, all right? Because yes, when you're using DSL, you don't have a compile time check, all right? Till here, this is something we have. So when you look to this module, I mean, you still need to go and build it and provide it. It's a bit better because you don't need to use those gets, right? But it's still not perfect. So the question was, can I generate this module? Can I, like, I don't want to do it myself. I want this thing to be generated for me, right? So let's use annotations. Who here likes to use annotations for their dependency injection? Man, not that many hands. All right, I was expecting a bit more. All right. Yeah, to bring annotations, you will need to bring another dependency. Now, I think here there is one thing that we need to sort of like slow down even more. We're working with an SDK, and this is going to be integrated in different apps. Some apps, they might not use annotations, right? If you do this to your SDK, right, you will be forcing all those apps to also use annotations. So you need to measure and balance this. And this is the but that was in the beginning that I was talking about. You need to measure it. For really big SDKs that are used across multiple apps, and this might actually speed up your SDK development, then you might think about it. So let's go forward and let's think about it. So in here, I am using version catalog again, and I'm bringing a KSP plugin. And I am also bringing a Koin annotations, which is another dependency that you will need. Now, as I said, I started in 2009, and this is sort of a history. So for some people that are new here, or they only have 2 or 3 years of development in Android, I remember back then when we were using Java, right, and we had to use APT, which is Annotation Processing Tool, right? That was designed for Java. And is anyone acquainted with butter knife? Did you guys use butter knife? Put those hands in the air. Okay, all right. So butter knife was using APT, right? And then Kotlin showed up, right? And we needed something that worked with Kotlin. So KPT was introduced. Dagger is still using KPT, for instance. I think they introduced KSP really recently, is in beta mode for them, as far as I heard. Haven't tried it yet, so if anyone tried it, approach me. I would like to know their opinion. And then later on, it came KSP. That, according to JetBrains, is twice as fast, right? That's what their website is saying. So, okay, enough of history. We know that KSP is a Kotlin Symbol Processor doing kind of the same thing as KPT. Usage of annotations. Okay, so you still need a module, right? In a normal scenario, in an app for Koin, you don't need to declare a module manually if you want to. Actually, a generic one is done for you as soon as you bring the dependencies, and it will try to read across the modules. Now, the thing that I said is that these modules, they have to be internal, right? And you don't want KSP to be on your app and also on your SDK. And when they compile both, that this thing is generating dependencies on the apps module, because they shouldn't have access to it. And that shouldn't happen. So the thing is, what is very important here in this Koin module that I am declaring here with annotations is the component scan. You need to specifically put your package there, so it only will scan for dependencies that are inside of your SDK, all right? This is really important if you do that. Try to also, when you do it, just for like seeing if your setup is done, because usually you only do this like 1 or 2 times when you add new modules, but after that is like once they are declared there, you don't touch them that much. Try to see what the builder actually does for you, because you can check the classes that were generated, all right? So just to be sure about what is happening. How would you declare a singleton? I mean, it's just annotating it, right? You can annotate it as a single, and yeah, therefore I have my coffee machine. Again, this is what I would expect from a DI, right? It resolves the dependencies for me as soon as I also declare the other singletons that are needed. Now, how do you load that module in your isolated context? So we need to go back into our isolated context, and we need to put this specific one that was annotated into the modules, right? Because otherwise it will not be able to find it anywhere. And one cool thing is you do have a compile time check, right? A lot of people were complaining that Koin doesn't have a compile time check. It doesn't have a compile time check. Dagger has a compile time check. Well, actually, if you're using annotations, and if you do use this flag, it will allow you to have a compile time check. Now, some of you might be questioning, so what if I actually have DSL, DSL2, and annotations, and all together, this is like a salad, but, someone is laughing back there, and the thing is, resolving the dependencies, and you have this check. So, imagining that you actually have a coffee machine that needs coffee beans, but the coffee beans are provided by DSL. There is an annotation that you can use in the constructor, which is called provides. And what that annotation will do, it will tell KSP that if you don't find it under annotations, don't worry. There is another module that is already providing it for you. When you use provides, be sure that it really provides. Otherwise, you might end up with, thinking that your compile time check is really checking, but you need to be sure about that one. And I mean, when we use dependency injection, everybody says that the biggest thing is testing, right? So what about testing, right? I would like to know your opinion. Is it looking good? Do you guys like it until now? It's looking nice. What you guys see? All right, I see some heads nodding. Really, thank you so much. So, what about testing? I mean, if you're using DI, let's be honest. If you're using DI already, most of your constructors that you have in place, they already allow you to do a simple fake classes that you put there, right? So you're already having a nice pattern towards testing. That's already good. But Koin, nevertheless, allows you to have Koin test. So let's go back and import only for testing in this case, all right? Our Koin test library, and what it will do, it will grab the global context if you actually start using it. Sorry, this is a test that I just created for the sake of representing it. Usually, you don't need to override your Koin context, all right? It's not really what you would need to do. In this case is because we are using our isolated context. So when I need my modules, I really need to override them. All right, and this is where Koin has a very cool feature, which is dynamic load moduling, right? You can dynamically load more modules on runtime, and it will still work for you. So in this case, in the setup of the test, I will have to load that, right? And I will have to put it there. So therefore, when I go, sorry, I jumped one. So therefore, when I actually want to inject, it is possible for me, right? Because that module that is there contains the overridings. You can imagine that this overriding would be just providing fakes. I'm going to show you in a few slides later how this looks like. So the module per se, if you're using DSL, right, it looks like this. You have your coffee machine, but as you've seen, what I'm providing here is a fake electricity provider, and I'm also providing a fake coffee beans. And this is what you actually wanted to. You don't need, though, you don't need to provide the coffee machine, right? Because what you are doing is just overriding. So you just needed to actually provide the fakes, to be honest. This is just for representing. But when you go to instead of DSL, you want to use annotations. So you can actually load a module, but you want the module to be also generated for you. Again, like I'm doing all this and I'm building my coffee machine and so on and so forth. But can I use that with annotations? Sure, you can. And here is where the module will start looking like daggerish. The word daggerish, it's just funny. And the way it looks like is you provide your fakes, right? And you just annotate behind the function if you want that fake to be a singleton or a factory for you. And then you need to use this module, which is generated for you, on your test. And then, voila, you can inject your coffee machine on your test. Okay, it's quite some work, so that's why, like I said, you need to measure what you use for what. In those modules, what I find interesting is if you have actually a large SDK that has a lot of code, then you start using quite some fakes, right? And it's faking a user that is this, or it's faking the user that is that. So when you start using it, and in a large scale, that's when you start seeing the real benefit of using this this way of testing. So now, what if my SDK is in KMP? All right. So SDK was already complicated, right? and then you had KMP that, I mean, showing in the morning, someone actually showed KMP libraries, and he was saying that I just want to release iOS, and then I also want to release Android SDK, and just to put this in CI is already very painful, right? Because you need to configure much more than it is. So you can use it, and I will show you how to use it. But before I do, I would say measure again if your SDK is that big enough to then go through this approach, all right? Because otherwise, might not be worth it. So, question: KMP with DSL, you can use it. Again, you bring your core, very easy. You do your Koin context, but you will do it in your Koin main. You might need, when you want to load like modules that are platform specific, then you need to build an extra layer for you. It's not that complicated, but I will show you. Basically, it's just a class module that will get platform modules from each platform. So it's just an expect, right? And it will load a module or a list of modules. This is just for representing, of course, but usually you actually load a list of modules for it, because you can declare different types of modules inside of each platform and then load it in KMP. So, but when you look at this, Android and iOS, I mean, this code is basically a copy-paste. It really is a copy-paste. And even though they are for different platforms, it feels like painful again. Like, why should I be declaring them twice for each platform? And then the other thing is, expect when it comes to objects or interfaces, it complains, so your IDE needs to bring a lot of, yeah, maybe they can improve that part. Yeah, I hope so. I really hope so. So to bring KSP with annotations, because we want to generate those modules, right? That's what we want. We don't want to code them. You need to bring core as it was, and you need to bring annotations. But annotations in this sense is API, and the reason for it is that you will need to generate those across different source sets, right? The iOS, the Android, and if you're supporting wherever other KMP platform, you will be repeating that. One thing though is that when it comes to KSP, the setup is quite painful. And this is what I said, like if you bring it, you need to be careful, because the setup about KSP is quite heavy. If it's DSL in KMP, works perfectly, nothing against it. But KSP is bringing that, and you need to do it per source set, otherwise it doesn't really generate the code properly. By the way, I'll give you a piece of code that actually I spent a lot of time, and is like, if you only bring KSP, but you don't do this to generate your metadata, it's not going to generate according to what you actually need. So more boilerplate code that you don't really, or you shouldn't need that. Now, let's look into how this looks like, right? I mean, we're going to use annotations with KMP, and the way it works is, again, the same. Okay, so in this sense, you basically, if you already had code before, you kind of like only port it, which is the nice way. But keep in mind, component scan needs to be there. Otherwise, you might be generating dependencies in the app that you don't need to. So take that into mind. And then you have your single in there in common main. But is it as an expect? What this will do is that you're declaring a singleton for both platforms. So basically, the platform electricity provider will be a singleton, and you are telling that in one single place, which is in your common main. Wherever each platform does will be independent. You just need to implement it for you. So if you have an iOS developer, you just, hey, I am expecting this. And he brings the actual. Now, the thing is, IDE will start complaining again, because if you annotate a class on an expects with a single, he also expects you to use a single on the other source set. You can ignore that, because actually it generates the code quite nicely for you, so it's not really needed. But it's one way of doing it, right? So all in all, I mean, we were able to use Koin inside of an SDK, right? We are able to do this with annotations. We are able to have a compile time check on our SDK for the dependencies that are internally. So when you look at that, is way more similar while coding an app. So for any other developer that jumps into it, it would be really, really lean, because he would feel like, let's say, at home. So let's go into conclusions, right? Can we use Koin with your SDK? Yes, we can. We can, and it's working perfectly. No problems at all. There are like maybe some constraints, but I will show you the list of them. There is a lot of pros, as you've seen, like easy testing, better code readability. You can use DSL. You can actually use annotations, but with non-KMP projects, or otherwise you'll have to bring all this setup that you saw there. And I have the feeling like this will change in the meantime, because it's not going to stay like that. It's quite painful to do that in KSP for KMP. And then there is, like, if you use annotations, they do support internal. So, well, if you annotate a class as internal, the one that is also generated for you is internal, so no problem at all. The ability to analyze and track performance out of the box is something that it's more like, let's say, Koin based. They actually have a tool for that, and you can monitor it cloud based. And you can actually see how your dependencies are going on, so you can improve. And then the cons. I mean, like I said, KSP is a bit hard for KMP projects. Having dependencies passed from the app, which might be using another DI, and then using it inside of your SDK, you need to be careful with that, all right? So you need to know what are you actually declaring as singletons and then providing it. And there might be, I mean, we only had one issue. It was very small, is if your app is also using Koin and they are using too much far apart of versioning, it might be like a clash, right? Because, of course, at a certain point, they will need to update your library, and your library is already having the latest version of Koin, so they sort of match there. I guess these were the cons that we only had until now. And yeah, that's mostly it. So thank you for your time. And I am free for questions and answers.
Thank you so much.